Hey guys, I was gonna post last week and then my sister got a sinus infection, and in taking care of her, I also got a sinus infection. Hence the hot tea 24/7. Anyway, I wanted to hop on here and make a video because the next few weeks of my life are gonna be really crazy. And if I don't get to make one, then I want to at least talk about what I had in mind for this past week that I didn't get to do. So, I guess to preface, this is gonna sound a little silly maybe, but whatever, just roll with it. So, I do a lot of praying, for various things, and one of those things is the kind of partner I want in the future, the kind of husband I am looking for, and I just kept praying to God. I was like, listen, God, I really want a man like Peter or like Paul, someone who's really like just a leader, just in the kingdom, kind of just bold, reckless, all the things that we love about Paul and Peter, right? And then a little bit later on in church one Sunday, we were talking about how shepherds, which in the Bible, shepherds and sheep are referenced a lot. Typically, God is the shepherd and we are the sheep. Sheep are very dependent creatures, right? They tend to follow their flock, but some like to go off on their own. And what they don't realize when they go off on their own is there's lions and predators and cliff edges and things that could hurt them, right? So for the sheep that tend to be a little independent, willing to stray from the crowd, the leader type sheep, right, that are independent, what shepherds used to have to do to teach them to trust the shepherd was break their legs and carry the sheep around his shoulders until the legs healed. And the shepherd would feed and give water to the sheep, and essentially over the healing process, that sheep would learn, like, this is my shepherd, I can trust him. And it had to be done that way because there was no way to speak English to this sheep and be like, hey, by the way, bud, if you keep going off, you're probably gonna get eaten by a tiger or a lion, whatever it is. Like, you're not safe when you leave me. There's no way to say that with words. And so it had to be shown with actions, right? And we're not all that different, right? That's why that imagery is so helpful to us in scripture and in real life, right? And so we talk about this analogy in church, and God just kind of like, I always say he slaps me in the face, but we all know it's like a little love tap, I guess. It doesn't feel like it sometimes, but he basically was like, girl, you've been praying for this sort of type of man, and let me tell you, there's a lot more pruning. There's a lot more pruning with that kind of a man. And not only that, but he walked me through a lot of things even in my own life, right? So the concept for today is like, leaders have to go through a different kind of pruning, okay? And just to, again, kind of ground us in a scriptural truth, Jesus tells us that the leader is the ultimate servant, okay? So leader, a lot of times in our culture, can be pushed more towards like self-centered, self-focused, getting the job done, looking at the bottom line. And you know what, at times that are appropriate, sometimes you do have to be the person that's willing to look at the bottom line or figure out the harsh truth of a situation. But there will always be a way to do it in love and with restoration in mind, right? And so leadership in God's kingdom does not often mirror leadership in our world, even though there are things that overlap. So when I'm talking about a leader, in the sense that like the thing that I'm praying for in a partner, the thing that I am cultivating in myself, I am talking about someone who is a servant leader, somebody who sees the people around them, sees the needs that are present, sees ways to fill those needs, is willing to be vulnerable in order to connect with people to then help progress along in whatever area you're trying to make progress in. whatever group you're trying to lead, whatever thing you're trying to accomplish, right? And so leaders have to be bold. They have to be okay with going against the typical grain. They have to think independently, and that is not independently as in discarding the opinions of the mass people or the group, but thinking about the higher perspective, even when the people around you maybe aren't gonna see it the same way. Like, how can you lead the people around you into seeing what God is seeing, right? And there, I think, is a leader really in everybody, but not everyone wants to cultivate it. And when you look at the Bible, to kind of bring it back to like the Peter Paul reference that I gave, for those of you who are not super familiar with Peter or Paul, I will start with Peter. Peter was a fisherman, and God, as in Jesus, when God walked the earth, Jesus walked the earth. He prayed, and he prayed and he prayed. He said, all right, who am I picking as my disciples? Who will be the ones that I build my church on and bring the good news to the whole world through? And ignore my sweet dog. But Peter was one of the 12 that was picked. And not only that, but he was one of the rougher around the edges ones, okay? He was very outspoken, and just like his default nature was kind of opinionated and a bit abrasive, right? He was not like the soft, quiet kind of guy. And the Lord had to do a lot of shaping with that man, right? The whole 3 years that they walked together in ministry. And when Jesus went to the cross, even though he warned the disciples multiple times, he said verbatim, like, I'm going to die and I'm going to rise again in 3 days. Told them this multiple times. They don't quite catch it. But nonetheless, when we get to the Garden of Gethsemane and Jesus is actually taken into custody, Peter is about to go out with a fight. He cuts off the ear of one of the soldiers that comes to take Jesus. And Jesus restores the man's ear, and it's kind of like, no, Peter, like, that's not the goal. We're not going to war here. Like, I told you what's gonna happen, right? And Peter keeps trying to be like, oh no, like, God, I would follow you. Like, you're the guy. Like, I'm going to the ends of the earth for you. I would die for you. And Jesus is like, you're gonna deny me 3 times by the morning. By the time the roosters crow. And Peter's like, no, I would never. And alas, he does. And that kind of happened on the journey to the cross, right? So some of the disciples kind of trailed behind Jesus as he was going through the motions of like kind of the trial and like the hearing with Pontius Pilate and figuring out like which prisoner is going to be released, which one's going to the cross. So you have to think from Peter's perspective, when he's following Jesus from a distance, there's obviously tension. People are obviously out to get someone's throat, okay? Someone's dying here. Someone's going out, okay? It's just a matter of who, what, when, how. So Peter doesn't at this point in time know for sure what's gonna happen. He just knows that his like very best friend in the world and his mentor is like his rabbi. So like a rabbi, a teacher, is very different even than what we would consider like a mentor in today's culture. It's a very deep thing. Like, you learn to become like your rabbi by living life with your rabbi, if that makes sense. And so they spent all these waking hours together, doing all sorts of things together, and now this man is taken. And Peter is kind of asked like, oh, you know, you're the guy that's been with him this whole time. And Peter, out of fear for his own life and out of just trying to, you know, for once not speak up and be all bold and abrasive, is kind of like, no, like, it's not me, leave me alone, like, don't bother me, right? And does that 3 times by the morning. And after all that, when Jesus forgives him for that, not so much because Jesus needed to forgive him, but because Peter needed to receive it. Peter didn't know how to forgive himself, right? And at that point, Jesus tells Peter, like, you're the rock that I'm building my church on. And then a bunch of other cool things happen. I won't do the whole entire shebang for you. But the point is, Peter was not like, he didn't know how to lead. He knew how to be a little obnoxious, a little opinionated, a little abrasive. He knew how to jump the gun. He knew how to act impulsively. He knew how to have an ego. He had all that stuff down, but he did not have down what it means to be a servant leader, what it means to lead in the context of how would Jesus walk this out. But in those 3 years and then in the time since, especially following Pentecost, that changed everything. And so it took all of that molding to get Peter to this place where he was the rock of the church. And to briefly visit Paul, the other reference that I made, Paul was a Jewish rabbi who was also a Roman citizen, which was very rare back in these days for a Jewish man to be protected underneath Roman law and to have the rights and the privileges that entailed, right? But I don't know exactly how that all happened, but he was one, and was very well studied on the Bible, very devout Jewish man. And at this time, Judaism and Christianity were actually not separate things, right? That occurred more in like AD 70 when the temple was destroyed. Again, a story for another day. But at this point in time, Paul thinks he's protecting the Torah, which is the Old Testament that we have in our Bibles today. He thinks he's protecting Jewish customs, Jewish practice, Jewish laws, and that these Christ followers are heretics that need to be squashed, that need to be taken care of. And so he was murdering them. Just say. Not good. He was traveling all over the place, and his entire goal was to wipe out the Jews that believed in Jesus, that believed in the resurrection of this Jesus that had come and been on the earth apparently and done all this stuff. Like, he was very anti-Jesus, okay? And yeah, he was a leader. He was very smart. He was very intelligent. He was very dogmatic. Like, just all the things that for some reason God likes to take those qualities and shape them. He really does. And so the thing about it is, when you are that type of a person, when you're hard-headed, when you're ultra determined, when you're willing to just act, when you have those just what we would, I think, deem like initial qualities that make a good foundation for leadership, when that is how we are naturally, God has to teach us in a bit of a tougher way how to trust him, right? And so for Paul, that looked like he was on his way to go murder more Christians, and the Lord knocks him off his little camel. Was it a camel? Blinds him, says, Paul, why are you persecuting me? Yeah, that's it. Why are you persecuting me, Paul? Oh, he says Saul. There's so many details, guys. His name was Saul, and it changed to Paul after he converted to believe in Jesus. So anyway, he goes on this journey of, he gets to town, God sends one of the people that really knows Jesus, knows the disciples, is like, you know, in the thick of things, sends this man over to Saul. And this man's like, why would you do, like, he's gonna kill me or something, or he kills us. Why would I go and, you know, explain the gospel to him? But that man is obedient, and Paul becomes Paul instead of Saul. His name changes, the scales fall off of his eyes, and he writes a really huge portion of the New Testament. He travels and travels and travels. He establishes a lot of like the norms of what became Christianity, and brings in the Gentiles, which you and me, we're the Gentiles. Anybody who is not Jewish is a Gentile. So with all that being said, like, those two men did incredibly significant things for the church, for Jesus, for the gospel, for the message. And they were both messy, and they both had to get knocked down a few times to be brought back up into the fullness of who they are and who God designed them to be. And like, to really figure out, why did God give me these qualities? Like, how am I supposed to use them? The world thinks that I'm too much, or the world rejects me, or I have too much energy, or I'm too aggressive, and you know, like it's never gonna be useful to me, right? And I mean, I won't get into too much of my own just story, but when I heard that imagery of like the sheep with the broken legs just sitting around the shoulders of the shepherd, I that's been me for the last few years. And if you're anything like me, some of the problems that I had for a long time, and I still even struggle with to an extent, I was very, very driven, very determined, willing to push every limit that I had. I was not afraid of overexertion. I wanted to see how much I could accomplish, how much I could do, how much I could say yes to. And I was very passionate, very like zealous about things, very opinionated. Even if I wasn't spewing them all the time, I had a lot of thoughts, cared a lot about justice, right? And I pushed down my pain constantly. I had very real physical pain, way beyond the scope of anybody around me, but I constantly convinced myself like, it's just normal and I'm the weak one. Same thing with emotional pain or just emotions in general. I could not maintain the pace of my life without the expense of losing touch with myself, with my feelings, with my spirit, with my soul. And eventually, of course, all those things caught up to me in the form of chronic illness, where I was forced to stay still, where I, at one point, couldn't even sit up barely. I could not walk for about 6 months because I was so ill, so nauseous, so unwell. And I had to really just learn that, like, even if I am nothing else in this life, I am a daughter of God. I have purpose and value simply because I am, not because of what I'm doing. And God could not teach me how to steward leadership, how to steward these qualities that he gave me that are good, until I was stopped dead in my tracks, right? And I don't know that that's everyone's story. I surely hope it is not, because I've been through it. But it could be with, you know, maybe life just isn't working out, or you're trying to pick a career, a passion, or figure out just where you're going and nothing is working out, or you feel passionate about something, you don't know what to do with it, or maybe someone around you is going through something, someone that you really care about. The point is, there will be hardship for you if you are the kind of leader that has those qualities the Lord really loves and admires. But he's gonna have to save you from the negative side of those qualities. He's gonna have to teach you how to steward those qualities in a way that will not destroy you, but will elevate you, and therefore elevate the kingdom on earth, right? And that's not like the easiest word to hear. I know for me, that is like a very personal struggle. And I think the reason that I so badly want the like similar qualities of what I have in like whoever my future husband will be is because I've had to spend so many years cultivating what it looks like to be that servant leader, to hone in the things that honestly were destroying me that I didn't even know, but God wanted to redeem. And I think I recognize those things in other people now, and I see the value of a partnership built on those qualities. And so anyway, not to like tangent into that, but I guess what I would just like to leave y'all with, because I've only got a minute before my camera cuts me off, is if you have a personality that is generally deemed like difficult, hard to manage, like if you've ever felt hard to love, if you've ever felt like you're too much, I guarantee you, you're just probably the little sheep that likes to wander away, because you have a lot of your own strength and you know how to use your own strength, but it will never be what it should be outside of the context of leaning on Jesus and letting him show you how to steward the gifts that he gave you for your ultimate fulfillment as well as his glory. So, I think that's it for right now. I hope all of that made sense. Always happy to clarify, talk more, make part 2 if I need to. So anyways, bye guys. See you next week, hopefully.